Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? As Tom said, my name is Jeanette Gisbert. I'm the Executive Director of Volunteer New York, and I'm so proud to see so many friends and champions of volunteerism in this room today. Thank you. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce my friend and colleague, Sam Wallis. Woo! Yeah, we can do a little woohoo. Come on. Sam is passionate about education. He has been the Executive Director of Yonkers Partners in Education, YPI, since July of 2019. YPI partners with students to ensure that they are ready for, enroll in, and graduate from college. Sam and his team at YPI believe that a college education not only opens doors to economic opportunities for students, but also opens up a world of learning and curiosity to help students identify purpose. Sam Wallis joined YPI in 2015 as the Chief Program Officer and was the architect of the YPI Scholars, the YPI Fellows, and the YPI College Success Programs, and the driving force behind building the YPI College Zone. Sam began his work in education after graduating from Tufts University by joining Teach for America, and he earned his master's degree in public school building leadership from Columbia University's Teachers College. And I am very proud to say that Sam is also a graduate of one of Volunteer New York's signature program, Leadership Westchester. Please welcome Sam Wallis.
Thank you. How about Jeanette and what she's done at Volunteer New York? Thank you. So Jeanette mentioned that I started my career as a teacher down actually in the Mississippi Delta. And I was only a few years older than my 12th graders who were in my Intro to Economics course. And I wanted to be really, really cool and creative. Because if anyone knows that nothing feels better than when a Gen Zer says you're cool. And so I did all these creative things in my class with my students. I would have them trade Skittles to simulate a market economy. I would take them outside so that they could see what the oil market would do. Pretty relevant today, I would say. And I had this one young man named Stefan, and he would raise his hand and he told me, "Wallis, you're okay with us." And it was because I really did creative stuff in the classroom. But then on the day of the exam that he needed to pass to graduate, I looked over and I saw Stefan with his head down on his paper. And I walked over and he looked up at me and he was looking at a basic supply and demand graph, things we had talked about for months. And he said, "Wallis, I don't know what this is." And I was mind blown. Here we had spent months doing all this creative activity, and yet I hadn't taught him the most important thing he'd need to succeed on that test. I'll come back to this in a second, but a more recent thing happened that reminds me of that. A couple of months ago, I was driving, and as I made a right turn, the front wheels started grinding, and I could hear this really annoying noise. So I took it to the mechanic, I left it for the day, and I come back, and the mechanic gives me a list of things he had done to my car. It was the length of one of those CVS receipts that you get that just go on and on. He had done 18 things in my car. And I paid, and I started driving out. I made my first right turn, and now not only did the front wheels grind, the back wheels ground, and the radio wouldn't turn on. I went back and I asked, "What happened? You fixed my car, right?" He said, "Well, I did 18 things. I did 18 things to your car." And isn't there a lesson in both of these stories that I take as we lead not-for-profits? We do a lot of stuff. In my classroom, I did a lot of exciting activities, but I didn't have the impact I wanted. My mechanic did 18 things. It didn't have the impact because my car, I drove here and it's still grinding. Now, McKinsey talks about 3 different ways that we can think about data. Most importantly, though, to realize that impact is not the same as activity. In fact, it's very, very different. So McKinsey gives us 3 buckets of data to think about. First, they say you can measure your activity. We do this a lot. And in fact, funders, for some reason, always ask us to produce sign-in sheets. Why? As if showing up is enough? That's not the impact you all have. You have an impact way beyond that if we just can capture it right. So we think about these measures of how many people show up. Important, that's our bread and butter, but it's not who we are as an organization. Separately, we could think about capacity. How many people work for us? How many volunteers we might have? How much money we're raising? How many sites we're at? Important measures, but also not measures of true impact. And that's what I want to talk about today, is how we can really capture the amazing work you're doing so that you can show that impact in a really clear way. And I'm going to introduce a tool that my organization went through. Some of you may be familiar with it, and I'm only up here because it was really hard and we came through on the other side with something really helpful to maximize our impact. And that's called the theory of change. Basically, the theory of change says, if you do X with Y people, you will get Z results. It's your theory. It's not just doing stuff and throwing stuff at the wall. It's a very rigorous process. And let me describe how it starts. The first is to start with your challenge. We all have missions at our organization. That is not the same as your challenge. My mission at my organization may be one thing, but this is applicable to many organizations. For example, I see many organizations with the really great mission of empowering future leaders. But if you're going to solve that, you need to know what the challenge is first. What is the measure that is wrong? Is that there aren't enough folks running for office from a particular community? Is that what you're talking about? Is it that not enough folks are serving on boards? Is it that there aren't enough CEOs coming out of a particular community? If you're a health organization and your mission is to make folks healthier, also very broad. How can we find the specific challenge? Are you talking about helping folks with nutrition? Are we talking about raising exercise and activity? Anchoring us in that is really important. At YPI, we have a mission, but our ultimate challenge is that too few students were going and graduating from college in the Yonkers public schools. Now, I don't think college graduation is the be-all and end-all, so we don't think that that's everything. But we put our flag in the ground because we needed a starting point. And we measured how many students were getting a degree before we started. Now, I'm still not going to talk about the services we're doing. I'm going to jump to the end. What is success look like? Now, for us, success looked like students getting more college degrees. If you're an organization that has a leadership focus and says we want more folks running for office, you have a really clear measure now for I want to see more folks from the community running for office. If you're a health organization and you put your flag in the ground and say I want more folks eating healthy, you're going to measure what does eating look like in those families after they've worked with you. So because I'm a teacher, I'm going to take 30 seconds and I'm going to ask you at your table to identify, because many of you are clumped with your organization, 30 seconds, what is the challenge you're really solving? Not your mission. What is the challenge and what would success look like? And when my hand goes up like this, I'm going to come back. So take 30 seconds with the folks around your table. What is the challenge and measure of success? Go for it. All right. Thank you all for going through that. This will be your homework. You thought you were coming just to do something today, but you have homework. So once you have your challenge and your measure of success, now we're talking about how you can identify real impact. But the next step is actually what my organization found to be the most challenging. And this is identifying a target group. And here's why this is so challenging. We learned nationally, the data shows this overwhelmingly, and we saw this in Yonkers. Top performing students in high school go to college and make it without us. So in a world of really rare resources, when I have to raise money, and many of you do every day, why would we spend resources perhaps working with a target audience who might be okay without us? Why was this hard? Because it's really hard for me to tell my staff that student was going to be okay. And so identifying the target audience, who is it who we really need to be working with, involves a lot of data and slicing and dicing to see. We wish we could serve everybody and give more, but we don't have resources. The Yonkers Public School is a $500 million budget. Mine is $2.5 million. How can I help everyone? We can't. So we have to select a target population. And it begs the question of asking ourselves, what would be the counterfactual? In other words, what would happen if we didn't exist? Like I said, in my organization, some of my students, many of them, would have been okay without us. So we had to think about who we really wanted to work with. And there's one tool that we use to get at this, and it's called the control group. Many of you are probably familiar with this. If we have a community very similar, and the similarity is really important, we want to make sure I've picked all blue people, all the same size, same income level, all of that. And we're going to give half of them some services from my organization. Now we can know if we're making an impact because we have a control group. So it doesn't just mean surveying your people or measuring your people's success. It's measuring the folks who did not get your service and seeing if they had the same outcome as the folks who worked with you. Guess what? There's some work you have to do on impact. So if you are the organization like mine, we measure students in the same bucket, the same middle performing students that we work with within our program and without, and we see, are they doing better? If you're an organization like the example I gave about a leadership development organization, see, are the folks you're working with running for office more frequently than similar folks in the community you didn't work with? If you're a health organization, as I spoke about, and you put your flag in healthy eating, does one part of the neighborhood that you work with eat healthier than the other who you didn't work with? The only reason we're sitting here is because the vaccine companies did this and proved that some folks who got the vaccine did better than the folks who didn't. We all can do this type of thinking because then we go to bed not feeling good, but knowing we did good. Now, at YPI, our goal is 8 years away. My success measure doesn't happen for 8 years. We start with kids in 9th grade, and we're measuring whether they graduate from college, after high school, after 4 years. So what do? Just collect sign-in sheets for 8 years and hope they're on the path? No. We've come up with some interim measures. What are the things that indicate that students are on the path along the way? And we've come up with a bunch, but I'll share 2 to help understand how other organizations can think about this. 1, we know that a student's high school GPA is a major indicator of whether they'll persist in college. So we're going to measure that along the way and work to fix that. Matter of fact, right? We also know nationally that students' algebra performance is a major predictor of how they'll do in college. So we're going to measure algebra along the way. And there's a whole host of other things. Now, that's not just applicable in education. And I'm sure you could think about what you could be measuring along the way. If you are a leadership organization that I spoke about and you want more folks from a community to be running for office, what are the indicators? That they register to vote first, maybe that they intern for a current office holder, that they take part in civic associations, and measuring those things that you know will ultimately lead there. Now, finally, once you've done all this, now we can talk about the actual services we provide. We know that funders come to us, board members send us New York Times articles, and staff members have great ideas about the services we could be offering. In education, we lurch from idea to idea to idea because we put the service idea first rather than working backwards and saying the service piece, what we're doing comes last after we've done all the rest. My organization had to make some tough choices. We were doing a ton of workshops. And we learned that if we're going to move algebra grades, we're going to move GPA, I have to hire a different team that can do those things rather than just generic workshops. But again, that came out of going through this process. It's really, really hard to do this, and it may seem matter of fact, but I think about this all the time. Everyone wants change, but doing this at your organization is hard. It took us a year of data, being self-critical, and making hard changes. But as I think back to my student, I think back to Stefan. If I had done this in my classroom, if I had gone through all of those steps, I wouldn't have wasted his time with Skittles and going outside. I would have found the most direct way that he could have been successful on the exam he needed to graduate. And maybe, if I may go to my mechanic and bring this theory of change and say, don't do 18 things. I need my car to not grind, do the 1 or 2 things that will get me there, and we'll be happy. It'll save you time, money, and then our staffs, if we do this, won't be pulled as stretched as they are right now. Thank you very much. Thanks, Tom.
Excellent job, Sam. Thank you again. Another round of applause for Sam Wallis, everybody.